Thursday. Luke Jones will be on the scene for all things Ravens. I will be out there as well as Joe Flacco holds court on Wednesday night and John Harbaugh on Thursday as well. But meantime, the first place Baltimore Orioles, I do like saying that so much in late July, taking on the Colorado Rockies. I got a guy here who's a legendary Major League Baseball sports writer, presented the J.G. Taylor Spink Award during the 2006 Hall of Fame ceremony, and I got some other friends, Dan Shaughnessy, a bunch of others who are familiar with that. He is a columnist for MLB.com and has forgotten more about baseball than most of us know. He is Tracy Ringoldsby, and we thought great time to bring him on while the Rockies are here. And even though you're not on the beat, I think you've written a thing or two about the Rockies in your day, Tracy. Welcome on. It's great to have you back on the program, man.
Oh, no problem. No, I started covering the Rockies the year before they came into existence, so I'm pretty familiar with them, and I still go down there quite a bit to do my columns. It's only a 2-hour drive for me to get to Denver, so it's easy to pick up stuff from other teams, that come in visiting that are playing the Rockies.
Tracy, I've been to 42, 43 states. I can do the math. Wyoming's one of the ones I haven't been to. There was a point where my wife and I were coming to the Frontier Days to see Ronnie Millsap. No, I'm not making this up play. We didn't make the trip. Last year I was out there. I wanted to just go to the border and take a Wyoming. I mean, are you a native Denver? I don't know your background, but moving to Wyoming, that's a good life out there if that's what you want to do, right? With some horses on a farm, right?
Yeah, I'm fifth generation southeastern Wyoming. So
wow,
it's we go back to the original outlaws that came here to hide out from somebody, and kind of have been around here on my dad's side since the beginning of the settling in the 1880s, the 1870s, 60s.
Wow. Well, when I think of Wyoming and baseball, Mike Devereaux's a guy who was from Wyoming, right? I mean, there, maybe not a ton of players from that part of the world, but certainly an Oriole that was. I mean, how do you fall in love with baseball in the middle of Wyoming when there was no baseball team in Denver other than the AAA team back in the day, right?
Well, we had Kurt Gowdy doing the Red Sox, and he owned a couple of radio stations in Wyoming, so the Red Sox were actually on the air in Wyoming. But I think if you go to smaller states, if you go to South Dakota, if you go to Minnesota before the Twins were there, town teams were real big, and even to this day, American Legion baseball is huge in the state of Wyoming. I mean, they pay the coaches to coach the American Legion teams because they don't have a high school baseball program. The weather's not good enough, but they put a lot of money and effort into the American Legion teams. And we haven't had a lot of players by far that were born in Wyoming get to the big leagues, but Devereaux and Lansing both came out of Casper about the same time. Tom Browning came out of Casper, and in fact, after his parents divorced and he moved to Glens Falls, New York, he would come back in the summer to pitch for the Casper Oilers American Legion team. So it's we've had a few guys over the years, but we don't have many people. So to think that there'd be a large number of anybody going anywhere would be far-fetched. It's still the smallest populated state, even though it's the 9th largest in terms of land. So it's kind of our special little place.
I got to come to Frontier Days, right? Sell me on that. That I got to do that. I got to do the balloons in Albuquerque. I mean, I got a couple of bucket list things, but if I'm going to come to Wyoming, why not come during Frontier Days, right?
Well, I got a friend of mine, Nolan Ryan, coming in for it this week, too.
There you go. Well, we're right up on it, right? Big celebration coming up.
Largest outdoor rodeo. This is 125th year that it's been going on here. And it's as opposed to a lot of places, it's like rodeo. They have concerts. The concerts are at night, completely separate. They don't start till 4 hours after the rodeo's over. So it's the rodeo is all rodeo, and it's so big that they have to have 3 sections of bull riding. It's the only rodeo in the world where bull riding is the first event of the day and the next to last, because the wild horse race is the last. The wild horse race, they take horses that have never been touched by humans and bring them in off the range, and then 3-man teams are supposed to saddle them up and ride them around a racetrack around the arena.
Do you enjoy that more or less than baseball at this point in your life?
Oh, I don't know. I enjoy both of them quite a bit. I worked for the RCA for a while before it became the PRCA, but I've been doing baseball for 41 years and really grew up. My dad was a big baseball fan, so I really grew up. Baseball was more of a thing, and we lived in town at that point. My dad had one leg; he'd gotten run over by a train when he was 6, so we didn't do a lot of the outdoor type things like that. But baseball was something that he and I really enjoyed together.
Loving my conversation with Tracy Ringoldsby, who loves the game of baseball, the J.G. Taylor Spink Award winner 10 years ago now in Cooperstown. And they had a little gathering there this weekend, and I know you've been involved with all things Cooperstown. And big weekend for Griffey and for Piazza, right? I mean, and I guess this is the weird part where when a guy like me comes on and talks to a guy like you, we're talking about steroids and bonds and who did it and who doesn't pass the eyeball test and who was actually dirty. I mean, this is something that's going to go on for a generation for Cooperstown. And, obviously my cousin in the Baseball Hall of Fame, Luis, now 32 years, and we see all the legends gather up there, but it is always a strange time, and there's always sort of this empty period and this darkness about who is and who isn't and who did and who didn't, right?
Well, I guess, yeah, we're a little more critical of people in this era than in all facts of life. I think we want to know more and more and more about people than maybe we used to. But the way I look at it is steroids. They're a performance enhancing drug, and performance enhancing drugs have been a part of the game for decades. It's just that, like with everything else, it's much more refined now. I mean, I don't use Western Union and the Olivetti typewriter to file stories anymore. I have like computers and internet and all that. Well, you go back to red juice and the two different types of coffee in a clubhouse, or you go to amphetamines and you go to speed, all different things that players used over time to enhance their performance. And it just happens that we got more in depth on what we're capable of creating. They created steroids. Fortunately, baseball was at the forefront in coming up with a strong drug agreement with the Players Association, and now there are consequences to pay for using any type of performance enhancement drugs. And I think that's a tribute to the players, because the union was trying to protect the individual rights of privacy, but the players themselves forced the issue to get the drug testing instituted, and the players have been willing to strengthen the penalties when it didn't seem like they were strong enough. So I think in that regard, baseball's been at the forefront. But I always look at it, if the player's on my ballot, that means he's been through a screening committee and approved for consideration for the Hall of Fame, and that's what I consider, because I can't go back. I can't go back and undo the people that are in there for spitters or cutting baseballs or having some type of resilient finish on a baseball bat that's helped them. I mean, those are all things that help performance. So, where do you draw the line as to what can you do to cross the barrier, and what can't you? As Gaylord Perry wrote in his book, it ain't cheating if you don't get caught.
Well, and I guess that's where we are. We see the Russian Olympic situation this week. Maria Sharapova has now been, thrown off into jail on the tennis tour. I mean, and in Major League Baseball, they're still banning guy every couple of weeks. Somebody's getting popped and getting thrown out of the game. There'll always be someone pushing that envelope, right?
Right, and I think the best part is that they're taking a hard line on it. And having people pay the price for the violation. I think that was a good step forward. But what guys accomplished on the field at different times. Did I care for the steroids or whatever else? No, I think it's ridiculous. But I could say the same thing about greenies. I could say the same thing about scuffing or cutting or spitting on baseballs. Those are all things that give the perpetrator an unfair advantage. But we're suddenly a little more self-righteous now and want to hold people to a higher standard.
I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Tracy Ringoldsby joining us here. You can follow his journey out on Twitter, and thousands do. Longtime Major League Baseball writer, now at MLB.com, and hanging out on the ranch up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, but covering the Rockies from time to time. And the Rockies coming here, interesting franchise in that, we're in Baltimore. We don't see them much. We don't think about them much. They're not in pennant races much. But yet you look at the statistics, you look at the infield, much like a bunch of other teams with their own version of Machado and Scope, or Altuve and Correa. There's certainly a wealth of young hitting talent in Denver, but for the Rockies, the story's always going to be who's going to pitch and how can they recruit pitching, grow pitching, and keep pitching of quality at 5,280 feet.
Well, they just go out and pitch and quit worrying about all the trying to be too clever and too cute, and I think that's what they're finally starting to do. I mean, there's been some pretty good pitchers come through Denver over the years, and I always love it when people say, "Well, you can't throw a curveball there." Well, Bert Hooton learned how to throw the knuckle curve in Boulder, Colorado, because the late Bus Campbell, who was a pitching guru in Denver his whole life, and worked with people like Roy Halladay and Gossage and all these other people that came out of Colorado, his pitch that he taught was a knuckle curve. Okay, and so you just have to make it, as Hooton told me once, you just make adjustments. You don't make a big deal out of it. You got to make sure it breaks to the right spot. You're not going to have as much break, but it's still an effective pitch. And the Rockies at one point with Bill Guyvette running the minor league system wouldn't allow a pitcher to throw a curveball. Well, Chad Bettis has a curveball that's maybe 68 to 74 miles an hour, and a fastball it's 95. It doesn't have to be a perfect pitch to get hitters off stride. And I think right now that the Rockies' big problem is the bullpen. It has betrayed them, particularly the veterans they brought in. But they've got young arms that are suddenly starting to emerge. And Jonathan Gray is a guy that's going to be a number one guy, and he has taken on the challenge of Coors Field and relishes the opportunity. Tyler Anderson, the left-hander, who was a number one pick a few years ago, has stepped in the rotation. Chatwood is back and healthy. Had a little bit of a strange game yesterday, pitched 5 shutout innings, and he walked 8 batters. How about that? But he worked his way through it, basically threw fastballs and couldn't command his fastball. But, and then I think Bettis, now that he's back to being a more complete pitcher, he's come along. And there's got 4 other guys that are even in the top 100 prospects in baseball, pitchers that'll be here in the next year or two. So I think that's moved forward. They've got to solidify the bullpen. But, when you talk about the team, I mean, there's more than offense. I mean, like I talked to Larry Bow when the Phillies were in town. He says, the best part about living on the East Coast with an East Coast team. I said, what? He goes, I get home in time to watch the Rockies on TV. And he said, my wife said, what are you doing? He goes, watch the third baseman, best third baseman to ever play the game of baseball.
Wow.
Arenado. He said, I used to think Schmitty was, nobody'd ever touch him. And I love Schmitty. And Schmitty was a great teammate, a great player, belongs in the Hall of Fame. But every night you watch Nolan Arenado, you see him do something else, and you say, well, nobody will ever do that again. And, when you take on top of that, you take great defense and you put him in the middle of the lineup, he's a pretty good hitter, understands the game pretty well, is tuned in, very, very much a competitor. So, you have players like that, Carlos Gonzalez, Charlie Blackmon, DJ LeMahieu, who just kind of got shoved around, and finally the Rockies said, we're going to put you at second base. And you got a great stroke to the middle of the field. Don't worry about pulling the ball. Yeah, you're tall, but that doesn't mean you have to hit 50 home runs. And all he does is hit 315, 320, and win Gold Gloves, even though he may not look like your prototypical second baseman, because he's the tallest everyday second baseman in the history of the game.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know of any 6'4", 6'5" second baseman. They just don't grow them like that, or haven't historically anyway.
High Pockets Kelly played for 1 year there, and I'll tell you, the tallest guy to ever play second base, but it was minimal, was Dick Turkey Neck Hall, who became much better known as a relief pitcher for the Orioles. But he played second base when he first came up with the Pirates. But it was minimal. He did not, he was not the everyday guy.
Well, and then Ripken here in Baltimore changing the way shortstops look, right? No one had ever seen a 6'5" shortstop till Weaver stuck him over there, and that certainly has changed everything about all of these middle infielders and third basemen. I mean, talk about the love affair with Arenado. We got Machado here, and we talk about Machado and Trout and Harper. Meanwhile, if I guess we were out west, we'd be talking about a whole different set of guys, because Arenado's not one of those guys that comes into your living room unless you're Larry Bowen staying up late on the East Coast, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that happens out here a lot. But, the thing that happens, too, is when you talk about LeMahieu or you talk about Ripken, we're bigger people as a society.
Sure.
So, to try to stereotype things like we have a tendency to do, I think we get in trouble. And I always think back to going up outside of Albany, New York, and you can tour the Revolutionary War battlefields, and they have those houses that they've reconstructed and stuff with original type furniture or whatever, and you look at those beds and you think, man, your feet would hang over the end. That can't be comfortable at all.
But it's a kid's bed, right?
Yeah, but it underscores that we're a bigger society now. And when I covered the Angels in the 70s, Bobby Grich, who came over from the Orioles to the Angels as a free agent, at that time, people were like, well, he's too big to play second base. But you know what? He was a gifted athlete, and he was a great second baseman. So I think we have a tendency at times to want to just put people into a slot and not give them an opportunity to see what they're capable of doing, and Ripken was marvelous at shortstop. Gosh, I can still remember being there covering the Mariners, being there the day he got hit in the head, went down at home plate. And you thought maybe his career was over, but that was just the start of a great career by a great player and a great person.
Tracy Ringolsby covering all things Major League Baseball for the better part of 40 years. He's up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, I should say. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Tracy Ringolsby, as well as at MLB.com. All right, so this is a big week. I mean, I think it's really a shining light on front offices, ownerships, philosophy, strategy, long-term strategy in this trading deadline. We just had the Indians in here. They're a first-place team. The Orioles first-place team. Probably could, the Orioles could use some starting pitching. Remains to be seen whether they have the artillery to get that or whether anything's out there. Obviously, the Indians with the bullpen. And then you have the whole Yankee sell-off story and stories for a lot of teams trying to shed some salary, trade my problem for your problem. I think it's going to be a pretty active week and a half here, right?
Yeah, I think it's a fun week because particularly with the 2 wild cards now, so many different teams think they've got a chance. That they try to make these moves. And for the fans, I think it creates a lot of interest. For the teams, I don't know that necessarily a lot of instant impact positive comes out of these moves, but they want to show their fans they're trying to do something. And a lot of times what you're looking for or hoping for is, if nothing else, you send a message to your team that, hey, we're serious about this. We hope you players understand that. And I know that happened with the Rockies in 95, their third year of existence. They were flying home from Montreal on the 31st of July, and they got the word that they had acquired Brett Saberhagen from the Mets. Now, Sabes was at a rough part in his career and didn't overpower anybody for 2 months for the Rockies, but for a group of ragtag expansion draft players, the fact that the organization went out and got a player of that magnitude created kind of gave them a second win for those final 2 months, and they were able to make the postseason in their third year of existence. So. And I think those deals at times can go different directions. But, you bring up the Orioles. How good must Buck Showalter be? I mean, I saw that team in Seattle. I went out there and covered them and stuff. Buck's done a heck of a job at keeping everything together, don't you think?
Oh, with that pitching, for sure. I mean, they hit the cover off the ball, but, they don't run themselves out of innings much. They certainly don't kick the ball around. I mean, they play great defense. If they can just get someone to take the ball every 4th and 5th day, whether it's Bundy, obviously over the weekend we saw the Vanimal in Vance Worley. I mean, getting quality innings out of guys that when you looked at it back in March, you were thinking at spring training, how are they going to win 80 games with this pitching if they're not scoring 8 or 10 runs a night?
No, and I think that's a tribute to the manager and the pitching coach that you figure out ways to work through it. You've got the offense in that, but if you get down early in games, I've watched it enough in Colorado. If you get down early in games, the offense gets to a point where it can't do much either. So you've got to keep your team in the game long enough to let the offense get going and move forward. So I think at times we overlook when managers do really good jobs or great jobs because we want our teams to win, but we want to blame them for everything that goes wrong. And I just every day I look up on the internet just to see what the Orioles have done because I can't believe that they've played that well. And I tip my hat to Mr. Showalter.
Tracy, I mean, you've been around this a long time. I had my press pass taken away after 21 years by Angelos a decade ago because he doesn't like me, and I reported the truth about their last place. And this is before Flanagan killed himself, and the team turned around and started winning games. The whole Buck thing, I've written a book on Angelos and the history of the 24 years now for the team and chronicling it the whole way through. Buck taking the job is almost astonishing when you consider that Bobby Valentine laughed at him. Joe Girardi came in and said, no, thank you. Most of the general managers and assistant general managers, this was a job no one wanted, which is why Dan Duquette found his way back into this. Showalter's the one guy that signed up for this thing, and I don't know that it was any tremendous financial incentive other than he had been through a couple of organizations and painted the walls down in Arizona, as you know, when they were an expansion team. It is a fascinating case study for Buck to take this job and for it to have worked out the way it has, because certainly the day he took the job, you would not have bet on this happening if you had been around here and seen what mine eyes had seen over a decade and a half.
No, I mean, isn't it amazing, too, that with Duquette there and with Buck there, that basically the focus isn't on Angelos?
Well, that's on purpose, right? I mean, because if any time Angelos would open his mouth, he would say something stupid, which he did for 2 decades, you know?
I mean, they're able to deal with the personalities, and they've both been through enough things through the course of their career that, they're able to help get through that, as opposed to what happens at times where you see management people antagonize it. I mean, wasn't it amazing how calm George Steinbrenner got once Joe Torre got there?
Right, exactly.
Do you think these people took a pill overnight and just totally changed? No, a lot of it comes from what's created down below. When you had the Yankees, managers or whatever, they would bring up the boss. Well, whereas with Joe, just kept everything within himself. It didn't go upstairs. It didn't go downstairs. He didn't tell the players what was being said, or he didn't tell the owner what was going on. He felt it was his job to manage his team. I think Buck's done that with the Orioles, that you don't make public issues out of everything and draw people in. And, I think it's great for him to get a chance again, and I hope people recognize the job he's done there.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about that. We see it on a day-by-day basis. And, you can give me Machado and Davis and the money and what the old man spent and what he hasn't spent and what he's certainly the billions now he's pocketed off of Masson. The bottom line is, Buck Showalter, if you're going to write the story of how the Orioles turned things around, it was the day he said yes. And I think it was sort of against all odds that he said yes. And I don't know that anybody else could have done what's happened here. And I guess this week it's really sort of illuminated how difficult the players can be. I've seen insubordination in my time, Tracy, but I've never seen the Chris Sale story. I mean, going in and slicing up jerseys, that takes some balls of brass on the trading deadline when you're the team's best player, but it's also sort of a caveat emptor for any other franchise to say, dude, do we need to get this guy a psychiatrist? Because I've never heard of anything like this.
Well, remember, he had the huge confrontation with upper management over the LaRoche incident in spring training, and then he organized the boycott of tipping the visiting clubhouse guy in Seattle, because Seattle had changed the way it handles the tips and handles the payment of their clubhouse people. So, those are all problems that are coming there. And I mean, I think those are things that teams have to look at as they go into it. Do they have, and what it becomes is, do you have a strong enough infrastructure to withstand that? Are your guys strong enough that you can push that to the side as opposed to having it become a focus?
Tracy, I'm going to give you $1. Bet on a team in the American League East to win. Who is it? Orioles, Red Sox, Blue Jays, Yankees? Who do you like in the AL East?
I just got through singing Buck's praises. I used to scream at him when he was in Arizona, so I'll go with Buck.
Oh, you didn't get along with Buck at various points. I could understand that Buck was quite the prickly personality 15, 20 years ago now, wasn't it? It's almost amazing he's going to charm school or something, right?
No, I think we all grow in age and mellow, and I never really had problems with him. I don't mean it that way. But
he was more confrontational back in the day than he is at this point. There's nobody there to confront him, kind of, sort of, anymore, right?
What about you 20 years ago? Were you more confrontational than you are today?
Oh, without question. Johnny Oates and I went nose to nose, and then he told me love me afterward. So
how could anybody go nose to nose with Johnny Oates? Come on, you were really confrontational.
He was a Marine, man. He didn't like my long hair. Tracy, man, I appreciate you coming on. I've always been a great admirer of your work. Stay calm up there on the ranch, and we'll get the pennant race together. It was a pleasure having you on, my man.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Tracy Ringolsby, the J.G. Taylor Spink Award winner during the 2006 Hall of Fame ceremony, legendary sports writer, hanging out on the ranch in Wyoming, and covered Major League Baseball for MLB.com. You can also follow his journey out on Twitter at Tracy Ringolsby. That's Ringolsby. And if you know baseball, you probably know who he is, because I certainly do. You can find me out on the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear from wherever you you are, even in Casper and Cheyenne, Wyoming, little WNST comes in on your mobile device as long as Wi-Fi is working there, and I have a feeling it's made its way to Wyoming at this point. Morning newspaper gets tips to your email inbox each and every morning. Brought to you by Planet Fitness. That happens at 7 a.m. every day. It's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life at Planet Fitness. There's one right around the corner for you. You can learn more at Planet of Triumphs as well. Last but never least, in a week of the trading deadline and Ravens camp starting, we'll be out in Owings Mills. All things breaking news happen first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. In Baltimore, all over the National Football League, including here on Thursday. Luke Jones and I will be out in Owings Mills. Actually, Wednesday night, Joe Flacco and a bunch of the Ravens, or Terrell Suggs amongst others, sort of kicking it off with the